And now, Martina, could you please call the roll?
Certainly, starting with Jenny Biggs. It doesn't look like she's with us in the room.
Can you speak up? You're muddled on me. I can barely hear
Okay,
you.
just one moment.
It's better.
I just turned it up.
Oh,
Can you guys hear me okay?
yeah, it's better.
Okie dokie. Starting with Jenny, it does not look like Jenny Biggs is in the room. Larry Chu.
More?
One? Yeah, more. Yeah,
Up a little more?
The problem is the muffle, it's not the volumes, but just.
Yeah.
What are you using for a mic, Martina?
Just the computer. You guys can't hear me?
That's close enough. It's better.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You're good.
That's okay?
Yes.
Okay. Doesn't look like Larry is in the room. Kingston Cole.
Here.
Lucy Dilworth.
Here.
Larry Minikis. Looks like Larry's not there. John McCauley.
Present.
Rebecca Suggs.
Present.
Vice Chair Jennifer Howard.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
we can. And Chair Patricia Randolph.
I am here.
And Larry Minikis will be late.
Yeah.
That Larry should be here around 3:30, he said.
Agenda adjustments. Does anyone wish to make any agenda adjustments? Okay, moving on. Open time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the Citizens Oversight Committee at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised that pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matters not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please, everyone, silence your cell phones during the meeting or mute your microphone when reporting out. And Martina, do we have any members of the public?
It does look like we have a member of the public, so I'll just go ahead with, if there are any members of the public wishing to speak on non-agenda items only at this time, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. And Madam Chair, it does appear that we have a raised hand in the public. Whoever that is joining us by phone, you should be permitted to speak at this time. If you would press.
Hello.
There you go.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Rebecca Collins, and I live below Camp Amarancho. And first off, I want to say that I absolutely appreciate the field break, and the opportunity for having the work done on my property to make myself and my neighbors more safe. However, that doesn't mean that I don't get to express what has happened on my property. There was a very important snag that's been there for 50 years. That was one thing. And then the second thing is, for 1 month, there were loads of off-site material, approximately 5 loads a day, going up from Bothine Road onto Monte Vista and being chipped onto my property. Now, this resulted in, between 10 to 15 inches of chips in a very large area, an area that granted had Scotch broom, which, was pulled, which is awesome. However, this was not done because of something that needed to happen on my property. This was done for convenience and expediency. It tore up our road, and, it's basically sterilized an entire zone, covered up tree trunks, exposed the area to disease, exposed the area to invasives like ivy and bamboo potentially. There are so many reasons that this was not okay. what I'm seeing is so much community input has gone in to Shady Fuel Break, yet on the ground, there is not enough supervision. It's not okay to have so much community effort and hours and Native Plant Society and Audubon, and then just cowboy it on the ground. And that is what I have seen. You know, my neighbors are most concerned over the road, which was not to make that I am somehow better, but, you know, my first concern was the habitat loss. And, you know, a habitat is not, you know, 10 to 15 inches of wood chips with trees sticking out of it. I think there needs to be supervision. There needs to be drop-in unannounced supervision. There needs to be after, you know, during job site visits by the biologist, you know, by the you know, people in the office, because this was really not okay, you guys. And, you know, I'm still trying to figure out what to do with it. I mean, they did scrape some away from the tree trunks, but we're talking about a very big area. 5 loads a day, off-site material being chipped for about a month. And my knee was injured. I wasn't getting out. I normally walk around in the forest. And, you know, that's what happened. And I believe that best practices were created to avoid this type of thing. And you know, my neighbors are pretty upset about the road. I mean, I don't like the road. I'm more upset about the habitat, but I do want to see our road fixed. It has giant potholes from all these loads, you know, my neighbor says it was actually over a month. And I thought it was stuff coming off of my site, you know, because it was too steep of a slope going through Bothine and coming back up. And that would have been a little bit in the beginning. And then apparently there's spotted owl territory.
Apologize, ma'am.
And so
my apologies. There actually is a 3-minute limit to the comments.
I understand, but I'm sorry. This is something that happened to me, and I think you really need to get the full story. So could you please, you know,
Ma'am, no,
I mean, how often?
Ma'am, no, we cannot. Number one, couple
Okay,
things.
well,
You are beyond your
then
3 minutes, and this is not the appropriate committee. This is the Citizens Oversight Committee that does not get into the business that you're discussing.
So can you please direct me to where I should go?
Have you talked to our staff already?
Oh, yes. I talked to the fire marshal, but, you know, he was the one who made the decision to do this in the first place.
If you
All
would
right,
mind,
you're welcome to address the board of directors when they meet in August. Thank you very much for attending our meeting. Okay, any other public comment?
and if there are any additional members of the public wishing to speak on non-agenda items only, please raise your hand in the reaction. And Madam Chair, there are no additional members of the public at this time.
Okay, so next is the executive officers report.
Good afternoon, everybody. As we get into June, you know, we always think about what is going on with fire weather. And we had a fire in Woodacre the other day. It was a 3 to 5 acre fire. And I really think it's one of those incidents that speaks to what we are trying to do. And that is acknowledge that there are fires that can get to a house faster than a fire engine can. And this fire was literally at Woodacre Fire Station's back door. And that fire still was able to get to houses faster than a fire engine could get to because it started that close to the houses. One of the residents had done a very good job of defensible space, and one of the residents did not. The house with good defensible space defended itself without any support from the firefighters. And the firefighters were successful in defending the other house, but it took considerable effort, and the story could have been different if they weren't at the back door of the fire station. So I think that fire, even early season, June, is indicative of the work that we're doing. And that is helping residents prepare their homes to be self-defending. So I think a success story for the people who had the defensible space. with the rain that we've had, I think guys have heard me say this over and over. Fire season can be statistically worse following a drought busting year. It's likely that will be the case this year if we follow history, but it's just likely to be delayed. So I know I don't have to tell you guys this, but it's not time to drop our guard. We got to continue the vigilance, and when it comes to defensible space success stories, I'll just close on this. 33,000 inspections last year. 60% of the people who received an inspection took some form of action. They didn't get everything we asked them to do, but 60% of the people who received an inspection took a step in the right direction. So if we can keep that type of momentum, I think that's going to be one of the biggest successes for the MWPA.
What about the compliance on the other 40% coming back? Is that going to be left to the cities and towns?
Yeah, it really is. It's because that's the misnomer of our name. We have no jurisdictional authority. That jurisdictional authority resides with the towns and cities. San Rafael is the only city that is choosing to go down the route of citations. We'll see how successful it is. I think the solution is the partnership with insurance. The maintenance of insurance is probably going to be the biggest tool to drive compliance.
Yeah.
So just to make sure I fully get how this works, because it evolved over time, the people who are doing the reviews are not city employees, right? The cities that have come together, are there 3 teams now, or?
Yeah, there's basically 3 groups.
Okay.
So
okay.
the group that is covering the Ross Valley, West Marin, Southern Marin and Mill Valley, and then unincorporated pockets that fall within county fire jurisdiction. They are primarily employed by the Marin County Fire Department, with 3 of the employees being employed, or 2 of the employees being employed by Ross Valley Fire Department. And then let's use Southern Marin Fire as an example, has delegated authority to do the inspections to this group. And then San Rafael and Ringwood are together with San Rafael employees, and Novato is with Novato employees.
So the 20%, which is automatic check, right? It's the revenues come in, 20% goes out to the cities, and the cities take that 20% and send it to this sponsoring party, which is doing the work.
Yep.
Essentially. Okay.
Yeah, Marin County Fire sends an invoice to each of the member agencies for this.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. Good. And then from the perspective of compliance, I mean, back in the day, Mill Valley was willing to move towards,
I remember
more aggressive effort.
That's exactly, and you did.
Yeah, it's rare because you didn't need to do it. By the time the 3rd call came in, and it says, we're about to clean up your lot and charge your property, people were throwing the towel on. That was how we, how the city used to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that not still happening?
It varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Okay. All right. But it is possible. Yeah, because I believe that was Mill Valley's posture.
And so you're talking about the direct abatement where we get a court order to come onto the property to do the work?
I don't remember all the details of it. It was presented at council. The message basically was that by the time it gets there, people go, "Oh, you're really serious," and they would do it.
So direct abatement is a possibility. Many of our jurisdictions have it. It is just a very time-intensive process.
But if you do it twice, then 20 people will know that, it's just like anything else, right?
Well, they're using fines in San Rafael.
Yeah.
Tell your kid to eat the spinach or the dessert, and eventually they'll eat the spinach, right?
I suppose one other enticement is, because I asked for an inspection from the San Rafael Fire Department, because I know that I want to get a grant for some home hardening work I'm going to have done. So I want to make sure that everything's on my report. So that's another enticement.
As I understand, the other inside baseball thing is that from the constitutional perspective, you can only do the front door review, right? As if you're a postman. But if you go to your neighbor's house and your neighbor invites you to the back of their house, and the neighbor looks, and they can look over the fence and see that the other property is a mess, that is a way for them to hassle the other property.
I did that.
Yeah.
Well, we did it to another neighbor, yeah.
You invited them onto your property.
Yeah, well, he's there and I go, here, I wanna show you something.
Yeah, sure.
About,
Get the reprobates.
on my property, they, for the second time said, oh, she hasn't taken it out yet, has she?
Right.
Then went to the street where they could also see it and took photographs.
Yeah.
So,
So I presume that, sorry to interrupt, with a limited number of groups doing this, which is, I think, a good thing, they'll get better and better at it, and they should understand the tricks of the trade better, right?
They're really good. I mean, and I've been inspected like 2 or 3 times in San Rafael. I mean, they're professional, these kids, they're really good.
That's good.
It's also, if I could take it just a little spin, it's the flavor of wildfire prevention is really changed. It used to be that wildfire prevention inspectors was a portal to get into a job of being on a fire engine. And there wasn't a lot of interest necessarily being that inspector. But now there are so many people that have seen the challenge of the wildfire environment. They actually want to be inspectors. They want to contribute to the wildfire problem, but not necessarily from a fire engine. And this is giving people who didn't want to be a fire engine, but want to contribute to the solution an opportunity. So we're actually seeing, we have people that are in their 70s that are inspectors and people that are in their late teens.
So I think we need to go out for public comment on the executive officer's report. Martina, do we still have a member of the public?
No, we no longer have any.
Okay.
Oh,
You missed the action.
I did want to just state for the record, for the minutes, that that Larry Minikis has joined the meeting.
Yes. Okay, then moving on. So, script. Does anyone, so I guess we're moving on to the consent calendar. Does anyone wish to remove any items from the consent calendar?
And if I may offer something, you'll notice that on the work plan report, that there was a recommendation from staff to move 2 paragraphs forward and then not repeat them down below. If that is acceptable to the group, we can move this forward without having to pull it from consent, as long as the motion includes accepting staff's recommendation to move those paragraphs.
I have an additional reason I would like to move that item out for discussion,
Okay,
the work plan. I didn't get the fin.
So that is 6C, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a couple of really small comments that almost would be to the level of, I know that you guys are gonna have a writing committee and my comments are close to that, but as long as we're talking about things, I'll just share my thoughts and I'll hand my notes to you. Because they're pretty minute things I wanna mention.
Yeah. Is that on transparency?
On transparency with regards to the summary of findings. And then I've got a small thing on the finance subcommittee that's very small and nuanced that I'd like to make a small edit to.
I likewise have, they're virtually wordsmithing, one is slightly more than wordsmithing on each of the other 2, but
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I also had a lot of wordsmithing, particularly on finance, but thought that could be done later once it gets pulled out. But from what I'm hearing around the table, does that mean we're pulling everything out of the consent calendar?
So if I would make a suggestion, I would suggest that pure wordsmithing can be just shared because we have, who's the subcommittee? Is it you two? Who are the writers? There's 2 writers.
well, we're.
Well,
you
we're not
polishing.
gonna write much, that's fine.
Yeah, just clean it. It was minor cleanup stuff, right?
Just give us the cleanup stuff, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so the cleanup.
Yeah,
Let me finish. So why don't we just share the cleanup stuff with you 2 guys, and for anything that's like slightly more than that, just briefly describe.
And we're gonna give it to Molly, the one that
Right.
does all this.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it works.
I have one, I know it's just wordsmithing, but it does change the meaning of a sentence.
And mine is a little more than.
Well, he's got through them, he's got through each of the three sections, right?
So should we
Well,
just
that
not
means
approve the
remove
consent?
them from the,
Yeah.
leave the minutes into the consent calendar.
Yeah,
And so how does this work?
So you can agree to pull items B, C, and D,
right.
and then pass the consent calendar, which is 6A.
I make such a motion.
Seconded.
And then do we get to
Now,
to
we would
take
go to public,
action on?
then we go to public comment, and then we would do a vote for item 6A, and then we would address items B, C, and D individually.
Okay,
But we can
so we can vote on that.
eventually get to a vote.
Yeah,
sure.
Okay,
So we'll need a roll, check for public comment on 6A, and then we can do a roll call vote.
and I think there is no public.
Correct, so we don't have a public. And so we're taking a roll call vote to approve item 6A. And we're pulling items B, C, and D for further discussion. Okay, do we have a motion?
That was made. and-
Motion by John, second by Lucy.
Perfect,
All those in favor?
perfect. Starting with Kingston Cole,
Aye.
Lucy Dilworth,
Aye.
Larry Minnicus,
Aye.
John McCauley,
Aye.
Rebecca Suggs,
Aye.
Jennifer Howard,
I'm gonna say aye, but you'll see that I was absent for part of the meeting, so it's clear in the minutes when I wasn't there.
okay? And then Chair Randolph.
Aye.
We do have a unanimous vote of all of those in attendance right now.
And then for B, C, and D, you can choose to discuss, a recommendation would be to discuss each item individually. And then when you guys come to consensus, vote on them as a batch, B, C, and D.
Okay.
And I'm gonna go get one.
So, since I was the one person who wanted to pull the finance in the, I guess, under financial metrics, the third bullet, it says 20% of Measure C tax proceeds must be dedicated to defensible space and fire-resistant structure evaluations. That to me reads as if they're only evaluating structures that are already fire-resistant. And I would like to strike that fire-resistant word because it changes the meaning of the sentence if you read
We
it.
could say evaluations for fire resistance.
I could just say defensible space and structure evaluations.
Fine.
I think all you have to do
It-
is,
Excuse me, the term that's so often used in all of our literature is home hardening.
Yeah.
So we could just be consistent with that.
you could, yeah, defensible space and home hardening evaluations.
This one.
Meet with everybody's.
Sure.
I didn't want that to be limited to only
You
evaluating
want to say home
houses that
hardening
were.
structure evaluations, because home hardening could also infer around the structure, wouldn't it? Doesn't necessarily, so they're looking at defensible space and structure.
So what are we doing here, home hardening?
I would just keep the word structure in there. Yeah. Home hardening structure evaluation. Just a little more succinct.
Okay,
Doesn't change anything, it's
Yeah.
just slightly more.
but we all agree to the understanding that we are
Yeah.
not limiting this
Yeah,
to
not fire resistant.
to already fire resistant structure.
In there in the first place.
Yeah, so that's my only comment on
That's it?
that.
Easy.
Yeah, that was easy.
That's it for finance.
So,
I've got one small one on finance. You have to read this really carefully to understand the nuance of this. Basically, in the finance section, we're saying that we're not looking for the 10% from the jurisdictions, right? And then in the work plan, we're saying if we decide that the jurisdiction should also be limited to 10%, that they should report and that these guys should look over their shoulder. So there's a distinction there because what's in this first section under the bullet, the last sentence, is a suggestion that if you wanted just to allocate cost at the MWPA level to each of the 17, then you'd have to do cost studies to figure out how much goes to the 17 is very narrow. And my only suggestion there is to change the word slightly to make that clearer. The current practice should be reviewed by the Finance Committee if the recommendation to the board is to have specific amounts, and I'm going to insert, for MWPA funded administrative costs allocated to each program. So I'm just taking the word, I'm defining what's being allocated a little bit better because there's two tiers of this very accounting. There's two tiers of this. One is to allocate MWPA efforts, and then the second one is to look downstream at the 17 jurisdictions, which is in the later section. So it's a small.
And so what's your wording?
Yeah, sure, I'll read it again.
Yeah.
The current practice should be reviewed by the Finance Committee if the recommendation to the board is to have specific amounts, that would change, for MWPA funded administrative costs allocated to each program. It will be necessary for staff to do time studies. So I'm just defining a little tighter what that is. I thought about other ways to do it, but it just seems like we'll leave a piece of it here and a piece of it in the next section, and it's clear that we're going to be doing this forever and going with it forever. So that would be.
And is it likely that only an accountant-oriented person would pick it up anyway, but it's covered in case we do get there?
Well, when you give the instruction to the Finance Committee to look at this topic, you can explain to them what their job is. Right, so that's my suggestion.
Got it.
Okay, so that's it. You want to take that?
Sure.
Okay.
Although I think that Martina is getting all this down.
Yeah, but whatever this is a, okay.
Yeah, and Jennifer, that was okay for you? You followed what was going on there? Great.
Yes, I like it. Thank you.
Okay, so do we now take a vote on just the finance with those?
My suggestion is you go through them all and then vote once for all three.
Okay. So then,
Work plan.
well, yeah, I guess, or unless we want to take the easy ones and talk about transparency.
You know this might be easy.
Yeah, let's do transparency.
Yeah, I was trying to find my one.
So we're gonna do D now.
Correct.
Okay.
So just to smooth things along, I have one suggestion for transparency. In transparency, we discussed previously that all the findings from the prior year are populated both there and they're populated in the work plan section, and they're not populated in the finance section. I'm completely ambivalent as to where you put them. I think that's fine for your little subcommittee to figure out where to put them. The only suggestion I have is because I compared work plans comments to the transparency comments, I noted two things. One, my fault, work plan, we forgot to comment on one. The last one, I think it was E, and whatever you guys said, it looked good to me. What you said on each of the other ones looked perfectly fine. I think the words are really close to the words we came up with in the other section, so I picked one, ambivalent, with one difference, and that is that in work plan, we were unsatisfied with the one on allocation of payroll costs, specifically as an example, the rangers. And in what we said in B was just read above, and in C, we said we agree everything's okay, so those need to be, I think we all agreed that the B suggestion was the right suggestion, so you need to put them together. And then finally, I like that in B, we had a sentence that said, was kind of crisp at the very end, it said something satisfied, I think were the words. And I think that would be useful to put in the summary of the prior year, wherever you decide to put them, as to whether you put them all in transparency or you populate them. And like I said, I'm ambivalent on that, so those.
So which sentence is that?
Well, yeah, so in each of the, in B, in each of the findings, we started with prior year updates, recommendation, action taken, and I tried to make those really short, you know, because it's just a repeat. And then we said status. So in the case of status, in most cases, we said recommendation satisfied. So I'm suggesting you insert the word status recommendation satisfied if you choose the transparency version of it. If you choose the part that's in B already, it's already there. So you know what I'm saying? It's whatever you want to do is.
Tidy up.
Oh, yeah, just tidy it up, right? But the only point I'm making is that there's an inconsistency between transparency and the work plan section with regards onto that one item. We said we disagree, so you need to, again, tidy that up because we have a finding above which we've all agreed to. So
Excuse me.
that's it.
I am not ambivalent about this topic. I do think that the findings from the previous year should be attached to the sections that they are,
That's where it is now, so.
and instead of all in the transparency. I wouldn't make a huge fuss about it. I just want to state that I'm not ambivalent about it. I think they should be in their appropriate sections. Also, if I read policy, if I read the finance correctly, the policy section under finance is in fact redundant with the recommendations at the end of transparency.
See, transparency has them all as currently.
Right, so finance has got it under, finance calls it policy, which I think we should be consistent with what we're calling it for our own benefit of conversation as well as whoever ultimately does the writing. Maybe, am I in, I know there's redundancy. I didn't look at it for, you know, line for line. But maybe we could agree on where we're going to put these as a starting point and then agree that whoever does the writing cleans it up.
Sure. So where would we like them? Do we want them all in transparency or where would we like them populated into 3 groups?
She wants to break it up.
I'm kind of in the broken up group, but I wasn't going to fall on the sword over it, you know? How do you guys feel about it?
Let's break them up.
Break them up?
But
All
she
right.
has a further
Well,
point.
let's do it one at a time. So we all agree we're going to break them up. Sorry, we're all going to break them up. So that's closed. We're going to put them into 3 boxes. Okay.
She had a further point that in the finance section, under policies, it's dealing with some of the same thing. It's saying, this was a recommendation last year, now there's a policy. So we may have to do some cleanup there.
Right. And I think that's cool for the writing people to sort that out, the 2 of you, to sort that out.
We can just change that.
Yeah. We'll figure it
Circumspect all the way.
out. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else on transparency? Are we otherwise good?
Do we want to go through them one by one, split them out?
No, not now.
Okay.
I think it's obvious which section it should go, right?
Yeah, they're just
They're
labeled.
already
They're just
labeled.
A, B, and C, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And I read the transparency ones, and as a guy who wrote part of the B side, I was totally satisfied with the way it was described. In fact, our words are almost identical, so
Yeah.
it's
Great.
fine. All right, so.
So moving on now to the work plan. Rebecca.
And are there any other comments about work plan? Okay, so so first of all, I want to say, whoever on the committee and all of you, or I have only one of you, nice job on getting it reorganized or re-cleaned up, whatever. I was able to clearly follow it through. I got it. I think I understood and applaud the effort. Thank you.
It was great to let it sit for a few weeks and then pick it up cold, I thought. You know.
Well, so that worked.
Yeah.
I have 2 requests. Both of them are adds not taken out. So number 1 is, could we take things you've said a couple of other places and put them up at the beginning, kind of like an executive summary? So in the body of the document, we say that we believe, or we don't think there's anything contrary to the fact that CORE meets the requirements of Measure C. And later on, we say, we can't definitely say one way or the other because we don't have enough information to give you an opinion
On the other two.
on the other 2.
Right, the other 2 is first, and we take the other 2 at the very beginning, we work through it to the end, and then we put a conclusion.
Okay, so
Yeah.
reverse.
Yeah, and then we do core at the end, and it's short, and then we do a conclusion. That's how it was created, so.
So what if we said way at the beginning, something like, and I wrote it out so in case we want to rip it apart. The 2020 Measure C ordinance establishing the MWPA requires the COC to report on the spending of the parcel tax funds in the previous year's work program to evaluate consistent tax measure. To meet this obligation, following our review, we report that the core projects of the MWPA for fiscal 21-22 were aligned with a tax measure. We didn't actually say it that way. We said a negative way of saying it. For the locally administered projects for defensible space and the local wildfire mitigation, we did not receive any information suggesting these projects were not aligned with Measure C. We cannot give a definitively positive conclusion without additional information. See our observations and conclusions below.
So my reaction to that is that we've been editing this thing for like 6 months. You're putting the headline first, which, I'm sure that's not a problem. There's a logic to the way it lays out because we talk about the responsibilities of the board and responsibilities of the COC, and then we go into what we found in each of the sections and we tell the conclusion at the end. That's a very common way to do stuff. I just want to walk out of here today with a resolution. If you feel really strongly about it, I wanted to quit playing with it, but I don't have a problem with that. As someone who's spent a lot of time thinking about this. Jennifer wants to say something.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt in order to, I just want to say I like it. I like it and I don't have any objection to it. And I think we should put it in and then we should write everything up. And, we do get to vote on this one more time. I don't want to go back and rewrite anything, but if we didn't like it for some reason in the final product, we could talk about it. But I like it.
It would be repeated at the end of each.
It would be, but this is a very complicated section. So I think in part what it does kind of lays it out in the beginning so that you can organize your brain about what you're about to look at. So I like it for that reason.
So just one more question we were purposeful with regards to our conclusions, right? The conclusion was negative assurance essentially.
Yeah.
And so are you changing those words? If you repeat those words, I'm good. If you want to change the color of them, that's important to flesh out, right? So because under core, we said the COC has not observed any information suggesting that the core project for 21-22 were not aligned with the tax measure. So what were your words?
I swapped them.
You made it more positive?
No, well, yeah, but what I did is I took your words for core and made those the words for local and DSpace, and for core, I made it a positive. I said, we report that the core projects of the MWPA were aligned with the tax measure. Instead of, we didn't find any evidence that it wasn't.
Okay, so so here's the deal. So I got involved in this fairly late and there was no effort done in the 220s until I came in, and then we spent a ton of time in the 220s. And then as far as the 60 was concerned, most of the effort was focused on education. And then that education element was decided by the two authors of it not to have relevance, and so it was dropped. When we get into conversation about what would occur next year, I think more work could be done on core. And when we get into the retreat, I'll share my thoughts on that. If we could run the clock backwards, I would suggest we would have done different things on core and maybe done more things on core. And if we'd done those things, someone who used to do this for a living, I'd be more comfortable with a positive assertion. So I'd rather leave it as a negative assertion on core. And then with regards to the other two, the 220s, I think it's important to say in the 220s, as we described it, that there wasn't adequate evidence, but we found nothing wrong. So I wouldn't move that up to, can you read your words on that one again? Sorry.
Yeah, and then I'll have some more words to say about that in the next one.
Yeah.
We we did not receive any information suggesting that local and D-Space were not aligned with Measure C. I could have put a butt in front of this, I didn't. Not my style, that's all. We cannot give a definitively positive conclusion without additional information. Meaning exactly what you said, we don't have enough information to tell you, yeah, it aligned with Measure C.
That sounds okay, but well, sorry, I'm just gotta catch up, 5, 6. Conclusions, okay, so we said, why can't we just take what we said before and just put it up in the front? Well, why is it, I mean, I don't want to make a decision on the podium, as they call it, right? So what we said was, because we carefully wrote this, we said, because of limited review of agency expenditures by MWPA board and staff, right? The COC has not been provided enough information regarding local and defensible space programs and expenditures by member agencies to conclude that funds expended by the member agencies are or are not consistent with the agreement and the tax measure. The COC has no reason to believe that they are not consistent, but the COC does not have enough data to provide its required oversight. So we can't provide our oversight because enough work wasn't done. So we wrote that very carefully. Now, I'm sorry, it's hard to digest. Say your version one more time.
It sounded pretty much like a match to me.
Well, if it's a match, then let's get on with it.
It's not exactly,
Then why is it different? And give me a reason why you changed those words. Sorry.
because the thing in the section about defensible space and local wildfire prevention mitigation says we can't give you an opinion because we didn't get all the information from staff.
Correct.
That statement bothers the heck out of me because I personally feel we did have enough, we got 99.95% of the information we needed. And with 3 more questions, we would have had all of the answers.
So I fundamentally disagree with that.
I understand.
Because let's expand this, because I mean, it was our work, and I can tell you that, and I don't want to be insulting here, but the reality of it is that when you give a check to 17 different jurisdictions and you send the check out the door and you don't do as we've said many times over the last 3 or 4 meetings, if you don't do inquiry, you don't look into it with some level of detail, you don't create a record that says, okay, they told me they spent this on this, and I looked into it and I understand that it is around this and it smells right, and I've done some diligence on it. That had not occurred. So you weren't at 95% because he didn't do the work. And it's not our job to do the work. As we said in the 3rd paragraph of the document, we don't create controls, we just observe them. That's what an oversight body does. So I disagree with you fundamentally that we were almost to the end because enough work was not done. I'm not convinced that when you go and do a more serious review this year, you won't find 1 or 2 wonky things that should not have been were not done right, with 17 different people, with 17 different budgets, with different pressures, getting money from you for which they don't get a 2-day review to say, what'd you do? It's like when I pay my contractor for a remodel, I'm gonna look at the invoices and make sure that the sticks are going up, right? So I disagree with your representation that almost enough work was done. That's the whole purpose of what our concern was. Enough work was not done. And he's gonna do it now, right? And he agrees with me that more work should be done, right? Yeah.
So, yes, Ann, I understood first, I agree, and I would have said I thought there was not enough work done or not enough info received.
Mhm.
I do have a problem with the fact that we would go into this thinking it's not our job. I do think it's our job, and this is part of the retreat discussion, I think.
Yes.
So we're starting with probably a fundamental difference of
Yes.
what we think. Perfectly understandable.
Sure. Right.
So I did a couple of days with exactly 4.5 hours of going through the JPA snapshots, those horrible little spreadsheets we got. And I agree, the information was wonky. However, the information was there for all but 1 of the 17 agencies. I came away with 3 questions to ask of specifically 3 places. I don't think we got stuff for town of Fairfax. I might be wrong, question mark.
Yeah.
We got interesting info from Novato, and I would like explanation. Mark may know the answers. People who attended every meeting of the Novato Fire District might even. Bruce probably has all those answers, who attends every meeting, but I don't have them. And then one third question. And that was about just getting the explanations. So if we had answers to those 3 questions, I think we had enough info. I think had we spent, again, another half a day, we could have answered the whole big question of, did it meet Measure C? And just come away with a sentence to start with, yes, it met Measure C. Now, what we really want to talk about is here.
So there's a absolute foundational point of view with regards to management and oversight. And I put my Berkeley lecture thing on, and we can talk about it at the retreat. There is a thing called the Treadway Commission, and there's a Sarbanes-Oxley, there's Senate legislation. There was a massive amount of effort made after the failure of WorldCom and Enron that was responded to the question of who does what with regards to control. Okay. And the outcome of that was, as I've articulated, control's responsibility of management. And it was a shift that occurred, but it's an absolute bedrock at every board, at every public company, of how the CPAs work, how internal auditors work, about all that stuff. It is what it is. So
May I comment?
Sure.
So, I mean, I don't have all of John's background, either, on the ground experience or educational experience, but it's really clear to me that I totally agree with what he's saying about who should be doing what, even just from a common sense perspective. And I think the most important thing that this group needs to do in these early years is create a template that makes it a viable, functioning organization going forward. So we can rotate off and other people can rotate on, and it's clear what their role is and how to get the job done much more efficiently than the way we've gotten it done.
Yeah, full
Yes,
support.
ma'am. Yeah, full support.
Yeah.
So,
Can I interject one thing? Rebecca, what you're talking about is the information that Mark gathered. And that, to me, that's just raw numbers. That's not answering the question of were these appropriate expenditures? Were these, if I'm just looking at the numbers, that's not telling me a whole lot. I think.
yeah, you got to go to the visit for a half a day. You got to roll around in it a little bit to get comfortable.
I don't think so. I think so where I got the information was from the ATC meetings and the ops meetings that already vetted all of that said, are these appropriate or are they not? They were looking at all of that. Granted, they're doing it a lot better now than they were back then, but they were still doing it. And I trust what they said about, yes, those are.
But do you know from what they said in those meetings that when it was carried out appropriately? And that's what, by Mark asking some questions every now and then, he might be able to find out. No, there's something a little squirrely going on here, where just looking at the numbers, and to me, just looking at the numbers is what finance does. That, to me, that doesn't answer the question.
It's like telling everyone to drive 65 and not having any CHP, right? The CHP is there to make sure people drive 65. But let me just weigh in one point here. We're right at the finish line, and we've discussed this numerous times. I believe that the statement which is made there is adequate, and I would like to bring it to a vote to say, is this good enough? And then we can debate at the retreat as to who does what prospectively, although to a certain degree, it might be a mute discussion because he's already taken on that responsibility. He's going to do it. he acknowledges it and he's looking forward to it, and I think it's a great thing. And as Jennifer said, the outcome of this is a more mature organization, which will be doing a better job, which is completely understandable. We were in year 2 when this started, right? So I want to.
I understand fully. I get it. I want to be done with it too. What makes me feel guilty beyond belief is I'm saying to the world, I'm on this COC and we could not get the information. We couldn't make a decision. We couldn't come to a conclusion because staff didn't hand us a document.
No, because staff didn't do the work. It's different. Staff did not do the work.
Staff,
And you're not supposed to do the work. I'm sorry, he's supposed to do the work. You're not supposed to.
well,
This just raises a very interesting question to me, which is, how do we avoid being a rubber stamp committee if we only take staff says this, staff says yes, so in that case it must be yes.
Completely appropriate question, because when we go in, we look over his shoulder to make sure. This year we said he didn't do enough work.
Yeah.
Next year when we go in, we'll look at his work and say, yes, that's adequate. No, it's not. That's not a rubber stamp. It's making sure that the work is adequate. So that's a perfectly right question, but we're not just going to say, he said he did work. No, it's not he said, it's we look at what he did. I'm expecting to see files with notes and evidence, things that you can see that is beyond a representation. Yeah, I talked to all 17, everything's good. That's not what's happening. We use a COC, you're gonna go back and say, show me your files. I wanna see 17 files. I wanna see dates of meetings. I wanna hear what you talk about. Sorry, and don't wanna be overly over the top on this, and what files you've maintained, and like a record, that's.
Isn't that an auditor's job, though?
Management's job.
Management's job, which we aren't management either.
That's correct. It's management's job. That's his job.
Yeah.
And then we look to make sure that as an oversight, that his work was great, good, crappy. Right?
You don't agree with that?
And I would add one thing, that in addition to looking at files, we select
Yes,
certain
sure.
things and go out and take a look and
Yeah.
see on the ground,
Sure. Right. Reperformance is what that's called.
You know,
yeah.
surprise pop quiz. We're
Right.
showing up at your,
One city looks kind of
your
funky, we want
project.
to look into it, right?
we would like to look
Right.
at this fire truck.
Right.
So, and just so I get, and I think we might be honing in on sort of kind of an interesting point here. Supposing we have, sorry to pick on Nevada. Nevada says I'm going to spend $3 million on grants. And then we get the information that they took the money from the MWPA and they've reported at the end of the year, they spent $3 million on grants.
Mhm.
Do we have any reason to go deeper than that? Do we have any reason to wait for Mark to have gone deeper?
So
Isn't that-
so the next step is that Mark goes in and says, you spent $3 million on grants, tell me how your system works. Do you have a file with 50 addresses in it? Do you go through, you have a process that you go through? Do you want to make sure that you're not doubling up? Whatever Nevada does in terms of their due diligence that makes Mark happy. And Mark might say to Nevada, you've done kind of not a great job there. You should do a better job next year as a matter of improvement. But Mark has looked over his shoulder and this didn't beat him at lunch and said, did you spend $3 million on that? Yes, we did. Great, thank you. So his job is to go and test what Nevada has done, right? And then our job is to look at what Mark did and say, yeah, you're in the ballpark.
Okay, so the distinction I would make there is that I think that is part of oversight, and that would be very specific to how we're watching the individual operations.
Completely agree.
In relation to the JPA agreement.
Completely
I think
agree.
my understanding is that Rebecca's point is that when we're doing a tax measure analysis, it's much broader, much less specific. So it's enough if they say, yes, we spent $3 million on grants, whether it's a well-run program, whether there was redundancies or confusions, all of those things would not be a tax measure analysis. It would be a JPA analysis or general oversight. So that's what I think Rebecca her.
I don't get the
statement.
nuance you guys are focused on, but the
Yeah,
point is, when it's
yeah.
all said and done,
Mhm.
COC is not a rubber stamp. COC is an active organization that makes sure he's doing a good job.
Sure.
And we comment on whether he's doing a good job or not.
But I think that.
But we don't replace him.
No, we
don't
absolutely
replace
don't.
him. We do not replace him.
But I think, and so for the purposes of the statement that she wants to pull out, which is the tax measure statement, is that correct? Rather than the details under the other
I'm not
JPA.
saying we have to take anything out.
No, not pull out, I mean, pull up.
Oh, that one.
Pull up to the top.
Yes, I thought we
That would be sufficient as far as a tax measure statement, not sufficient as far as more detail is concerned.
I don't get your difference between tax measure.
Okay, well, that I think does take us back to where we're heading on the retreat.
Yeah,
But,
sure.
but if that,
I'll learn, but
but if you think that what she's saying is not the contradiction, is not an actual conflict with what you've written elsewhere, is it, can we live with it?
why live with it? Sorry.
Yeah.
We were very carefully wrote what we wanted to write. And I think it's appropriate, and we beat it to death for a great length of time. And now we're at the finish line, and you want to push it up to the front, which I'm fine with. That's a style question as to whether you state it at the beginning. But I don't believe that the statements that this subcommittee made and we're comfortable with should be softened because you've looked into individual information and you're satisfied. And that's because it's not our role. Our role is to look at staff. Our role is to comment on staff's control.
there's a problem.
So
I don't believe, and that's the problem that's gonna be discussed at the retreat, which is why it's really challenging for me to vote on this today, because if we do, I'm gonna say no, and I
Well, you
know
can-
I
no,
won't be
that's fine.
overvoted.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm
Right.
gonna be overvoted.
Right.
It's just, I'll be figuring out how to ask Todd how to do a minority report. Because I don't think our job is to review staff. I think our job is to read the work program and decide whether the work program meets Measure C or not. We can look at staff, see if they're doing their job. That's only one part of a job that's not even envisioned in the Measure C.
So Rebecca, if I understand what you're saying correctly, really, no matter what we do with this, you're not going to be able to vote positively, whether we move.
Oh, no, if you did these two things, I'd be fine. I would vote, even though they don't change what you've said.
They do change.
It enough softens it, or whatever you, if it changes in your eyes, yes.
You made it more positive because of your personal comfort, right? So let's take your argument to ad infinitum or whatever, right? So if he didn't do anything, right? He just gave all the money out to everybody and said, off you go. Right? What would we as a COC do? We'd say, oh, no, you can't just, just pass the money out and hand it to the fire chiefs and say, hey, have a good time, right? And so
That's exactly what we said last year, which is when, if in effect the money had just been distributed, we said, have a reporting system so they come back and explain what they spent the money on.
But whether he does a good job or he doesn't do a good job, that's a thing for which the COC is supposed to have an obligation on. But the COC doesn't independent. If he did nothing, okay, would we in the end say that COC is going to spend 5,000 hours inspecting everything and replacing his effort with our own effort so we can then say everything's okay? Are we going to take the role of management? We're not management. That's what you're suggesting. You're suggesting that you step into his role.
We did last year.
That's wrong.
I think this is exactly where we're always going to end up. I forcefully disagree with the idea that we should be doing what we did last year.
For sure.
I completely agree with John's position on this. And then just to take it another step further, as this COC changes in years, I would not want to trust. I would not want to trust the job of management to a changing COC.
Right.
I really think it's important that the COC reviews what staff does, but not does the work of staff. That could be very risky down the road. We have no idea who's going to be in those roles, and they could have their own agendas and be forceful and and have way too much influence on what the ultimate report of a COC would be. I think it's really important that staff do staff's job. And if we look over what staff has done and we see any red flags, then it's our job to raise those red flags. But that's where our job is. I feel
I've
strongly.
got a suggested way to move the thing forward. Go ahead.
And I'm saying, I agree,
Okay.
fine, yes. I agree that staff needs to give us a couple more pieces of information that we didn't get. But I'm not saying we didn't get enough information, because I think we did.
So let me make a suggestion. There's two elements to her proposal on the floor. One element is to take the summaries and move them up to the opening paragraph and repeat them later. Tell them, it's like, you know, at the story at the beginning and at the end. I think that's a good idea. There's a second thing, which is a suggested change to the wording. So with regards to the first thing, is there any opposition to moving moving up to the front and then repeating it?
I don't like when things get repetitive, when I'm reading them and I,
Well, it's
say, well, we
executive
just
summary
read
at the
this.
front end, it's not repetitive, it's just.
Yeah, I think it is also, it occupies a particular role where I think particularly fulfills what we're required to report on, which is not to say that the rest of it isn't important too.
Well, I mean, it's very, as you said earlier, it's a very complicated section. So I'm not at all offended. I think it's not a bad idea to say at the beginning, say, here's your headline and then here's your details, right?
Right.
So are we all, do we have a consensus around that?
I don't have any problem with it, but I wouldn't want any of the wording that we've already done to be changed.
That's the second part. So the second part is, if you're gonna do that, we're only gonna, do we accept the wording as previously carefully written, or as you carefully wrote, which is different than what we wrote? And that goes fundamentally to this question of your personal comfort of doing the job, but I won't say it that way, of doing some additional work. I'm not comfortable. I would vote to take the words as originally laid out, which we looked at last meeting, and just repeat them.
Mm-hmm.
So how many people agree with that?
No, let's not
Did I say that
get
correctly?
around to voting yet. I
Okay.
mean, what she's basically saying, one more time,
Sure.
is that she went through and spent 4.5 hours and developed some personal comfort here.
Mhm.
But she's also saying in her summary, essentially, you've already seen the same information. You've had that same information for like 6 months, okay?
Mhm.
So you should be familiar with it enough so that when she says it to you right now, or you should be comfortable and just accept it the way it is.
Well,
All right? As opposed to coming back and always insisting that you have the only way to do it. All right, which is from the, I'm just saying, cut a deal here, work this out, take what you can, and let's get on with life, okay?
I'm fine with getting on with life, but I don't believe we should step into management's shoes. And what we saw, you're kind of, it's a little offensive what you just said, because you said we were sitting on our asses. That's what you just kind of said, and that's not what happened.
I'm saying that's what a reader, all right, is going to infer when they read the document.
A
They're a
reader's
normal
gonna-
person, that's
A
all.
reader's going to infer that more work should have been done by staff, which is permeates the document. And it'll improve.
If a reader infers that we've been sitting on our asses, it's because the reader thinks that we should be doing staff's work.
I didn't use that terminology, please. That's your choice, not mine.
That's
I
Sorry.
was just making a statement, thank you.
That's fair.
Apologies for the bad language.
Well, that was my reaction to the way you described it, because you said you had 4 months with it. So when you say you had 4 months with it, that's kind of
Please
implication.
speak to the issue, not to the person.
Okay, of course, I agree with that. I
So-
completely agree. This is a completely appropriate conversation. It's not a people thing. It's a philosophical, technical thing.
Well, I took it personally, all right?
So,
Well, you said we spent 4 months not doing anything. That's.
No, the committee did, okay, and it's a statement of fact or a logical inference, I believe, that readers are going to have.
Okay,
All right, you're the one that started in
So
with the
could I
graphic,
interrupt?
CRS and stuff, I didn't say that.
you did not say that.
so can I just take over the conversation?
Sure.
Thank you. So my second statement, based on our review of the information provided by the local jurisdictions. So I'm also saying, I believe the inference in part of this section was that the local jurisdictions didn't provide all the information. I think the only information they didn't provide, half of them didn't provide in those many things we got was their base from 2019-20. And what I don't know is whether some of them actually reported that elsewhere. My suspicion is yes, because I know Novato did. And they are one of the ones that didn't report it on that document. So again, I think it might be a question to staff. Does some of this information exist someplace else and we just didn't see it?
Yeah, so what we wrote was records provided to MWPA staff by the local jurisdictions were inconsistent in scope and detail or absent. There was no written record of specific detailed inquiry by MWPA staff to support their due diligence assessment as to how the funds were spent. That's how we described it on page 3. I'll read it. Sure.
No, I got it.
Okay.
And I have read it.
Yeah.
Again, I think I'll leave it till the retreat.
Yeah, I think that we're.
Yeah,
We're dealing with.
We're not gonna
repeating
come to
ourselves,
agreement on that one.
Right,
So
exactly.
how do we solve this?
So it's a kind of on off switch, right? There's 2 ways to do it.
Yeah.
One way is to take the original words
Yeah.
and put them in the front and then repeat them later. The second idea is to insert her language instead, which is more positive than what we get written. And that's,
And
and you're
is-
comfortable with that based on the work you've done.
I'm okay.
Is that a fair way to describe the 2
Yes,
choices? Okay,
it is.
okay.
And my main reason for wanting to move was just to have them up front, bringing them together instead of leaving them separate. That was all.
I like the idea. I think we've all reached that consensus, so.
Great.
So do you think we can agree that just by bringing it out and putting it up, leaving the language as it's written in the body, but just pulling them out as a highlight and putting it at the top, would that work?
You can't actually leave the wording exactly the way it is, but I think you could bring it up to the front and
You can paraphrase.
put a
Yeah,
sentence
yeah,
in
yeah,
front.
okay, yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
Are we satisfied with that? Okay. Great.
So I guess now we have discussed all 3.
Mhm.
Are we ready to vote on all 3? Mark, have we answered all the questions to your satisfaction?
But so, well, not to my satisfaction, my satisfaction doesn't matter.
Right.
Right. To my ability to help bring this together into a document, yes.
Yes, okay.
However, I do want to confirm that you guys are good with that recommendation, with those 2 paragraphs about the Measure C language above and removing from below.
Oh, you don't have to remove them from below.
Oh, wait, no, I thought we were agreed that we were gonna pull it out, not take it out, but reiterate.
So you
it
want
at the
them both
top.
Reiterate it.
Have it
Because
both
if
places.
you take it out from there, from where it is now, I think it will change
Yeah.
all the
Now
work
I'm
they
confused.
went through.
Now I'm confused. So are you, this is a different document.
Yeah,
This language, the Measure C language?
Oh, no, that's,
Oh, no,
Nobody has
that's
a
fine.
problem.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, all
Yeah.
right. So, good. So can I try to summarize where we are? And I'm sure I'll miss a few things, but maybe it'll expand.
Mhm.
So on the finance, I have one small edit, which you guys have, and then you have an edit, right? And there's 2 edits in the finance section, and that's it, right? On the work plan section, we're going to agree with staff's recommendation to move the one language about the Measure C language up to the front because it's part of an overall summary. We have agreed that in the front section, subject to a little editorial changes, perhaps we're going to take the 2 summary statements at the end of the document and make them headlines up in the front, but not change the actual wording of what's in the summary documents, except for nuanced
have them in
words.
both places.
Have it in
Yeah,
both places,
yeah.
right? Okay. And I think that's it for that section. And then the final thing is with regards to the transparency section, no changes on the transparency section itself. The decision was we were going to take the findings and repopulate them in each of the 3 sections. And you were going to, when you do your style within each of the 3 sections, you will use that language about conclusion, satisfied, whatever those words were. And in the one finding that there is an inconsistent view between B and C, you'll conform with B that says C above, and that was referring to the rangers. So is that what we were fundamentally
Sounds right.
agreeing to? Have I missed anything? Okay,
It sounds like a motion.
yeah, all right.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second. Oh, Jennifer, you can have the second.
Okay.
Jennifer is the second.
Could we have a roll call vote?
Certainly, Kingston Cole,
Aye.
Lucy Dilworth,
Aye.
Larry Minnicus,
Yes.
John McCauley,
Indeed.
Rebecca Suggs,
Yes.
Jennifer Howard,
Yes, please.
Chair Randolph.
Yes.
Looks like it passes with unanimous vote of everyone here in attendance.
And if I can offer this, staff will take 3 documents, put them into one document, make them all new, brand new, fresh document. We can move the recommendations or the findings from the transparency and plug them into the appropriate component. And then pass it off to Kingston and Pat for the consistency, refinement, polishing, whatever we want to call that, put it in that one voice. And then I've reached out to our graphics person that we used last time to start doing that work.
Yeah, we gotta get started on that.
Now, I have a question. Someone mentioned we get another vote on this. I thought this was the vote.
You'll get, when it's all one,
Oh, when
it's all polished, all
yeah.
put together.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
this.
do we agree to release it kind of?
Oh, okay.
Not, are we still tinkering
Okay.
with the words?
Yes, please.
Please, no more tinkering with the
Yeah,
words.
the TAM COC, we didn't have any controversy at all. And it just basically was just released last month. It takes forever. So.
Okay. I want to cheer. Committee reports of the committees that we watched. The board of directors was very interesting, and somewhere I have lots of notes about it. Nothing that was of terrific interest to this group. They voted on the new chair and co-chair. And
No, just, they didn't vote, they just
They
received.
nominated,
they
yeah.
received-
oh, that's right, they
They received-
nominated.
They actually didn't even nominate yet, they received the letters. of
The
interest.
letters of interest.
But could not be a more perfect pair as far as I'm concerned. They are, I think will be terrific. I'm just trying to think I guess the heart of the meeting was looking at metrics for all the goals, so that there are ways to measure whether we are accomplishing these things or not. And I actually printed up the staff report on the metrics. Found it a little confusing, but then again,
It's on
I
its
have
way.
I have a small brain and
No smaller than the rest of us, my dear.
And I can tell you, the metrics that we're developing, no one has ever developed, because
Yeah.
How many acres and how many miles
Right.
doesn't cut it.
Right.
How much risk have we reduced is what's important, and no one's done that yet.
And it's interesting that in the corporate world, it took, I'm gonna say 10 years maybe, to make that shift from measuring the numbers to measuring the results. And the results were so much more, and people thought, what the heck were we doing before? So I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of that. Thank you that this probably was inordinately painful, but it is so good.
I'm just glad we have Charlotte.
Yeah.
One other thing that was in the executive officer's report, which I found very interesting, given all the headlines lately, is insurance issues, which are really coming to the fore. And I for one hope that doing all the home hardening work will work. But I thought that was a very interesting discussion, but it was a very interesting meeting. If you are at all interested, by all means, watch the meeting. And executive committee, Lucy.
Okay. I think the most interesting thing about the executive committee meeting, as far as we're concerned, is that they were discussing the proposal that the MWPA commits staff time to the insurance proposal. I can't remember the name of the organization that was putting this together. And we all know this is a crisis, but a very interesting point was made by Julie, which is, are we not sure, are we comfortable that this isn't stepping beyond our limits? And I was very pleased to see that that was an analysis that was brought to the discussion. And so I thought, yay, they're thinking. And I think ultimately they concluded that it isn't overstepping the mission, but it was good to hear it discussed.
I still think insurance is one of the linchpins of compliance.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
One of the problems at state commissioner, that's the problem, is the fight that's going on with all the different insurance outfits and the reinsurance side. So.
And what do you mean by the linchpin for compliance?
If people can't get their insurance because they didn't comply with our recommendations and ordinances.
Yes.
Yeah, if you still have an admitted carrier, which in one of my homes I do, and one of my homes I don't, unfortunately, so I'm the CEA on one of my homes. But when one of the major carriers came out to my house and told me what they wanted to have done, which thankfully was very small, let me tell you, man, I did it like 24 hours later and showed them pictures, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because of a fear of losing my
Coverage for sure.
right? Because CEA is way more expensive.
Yeah.
And you have to add a second policy around it called a wrap policy, which covers your liability. It's really a bummer, so.
California not so fair plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that brings us to our one action item. And I would like to suggest, and that's the election of a vice chair. And knowing that things may change once we have the retreat, I wonder what people think about postponing the election of a vice chair until after we have had the retreat.
I'd like to,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm waving high blind.
No, I'd like to move that, and I also, because there's another issue of whether we should have chair and vice chair for a year as opposed to 6 months. Nobody else is gonna bring that up, but I'm gonna do it. Right? So I think we ought to change. So there's some fundamental changes, and that's why I would suggest moving into the retreat, maybe finalizing the next meeting, regular meeting.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Makes sense to me. That way the vice chair, the person who throws their name in the hat, has an idea what they're
With the
signing up
tenders
for.
Yeah.
Unlike everybody else who's signed up for it, I don't think that's all that fair.
Well, I mean.
You've been there, done it.
Yeah,
So what,
Yeah.
what, since this is an agendized item,
and Jennifer has something to say.
I just have a question. Does that mean that we would vote on a vice chair at the retreat or at the following meeting?
I think at the
it has to be
following
following.
meeting.
It has to be the following meeting, that's, you can't do business.
Yeah, I didn't,
so,
We can discuss.
and so what we'll do is we'll need a motion to
Defer.
defer this agenda item to the next.
So moved.
Second.
And I don't think can we have just a.
And it's a hybrid meeting. so we
Because
have to
she's
do-
there.
yeah.
So she's gonna, yeah.
Drive
have
in
to
for
have a
this
roll
vote,
call.
Jennifer.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow the conversation. What's that?
Oh, we have to do a roll call vote because you're remote. So they said, hop in a plane and fly into California so we can just say aye.
It's all your fault.
Yeah.
You can't just go, okay.
We're being sarcastic now. We're getting
Sorry.
loopy.
You can come here.
Martina, roll call vote, please.
Starting with Kingston Cole,
Aye.
Lucy Dilworth,
Aye.
Larry Menifee,
Yes.
John McCauley,
Yes.
Rebecca Suggs,
Aye.
Jennifer Howard,
Yes.
Patricia Randolph.
Yes,
And
Okay.
it's a unanimous vote.
And I'm so happy we don't have any members of the public here, so that we don't have to go out to the members of the public every time. So informational items, which the one thing I put down was a retreat preview.
Yeah, and I'll kick it off and ask the three of you that attended the meeting today. So as you know, an ad hoc subcommittee was created to help massage the agenda, make sure we're going in the right direction. We had a meeting today with three of the members. Larry was unable to attend, so we had Pat, Lucy, and Rebecca. We had Todd Cusimano and Megan Azevedo. Holt Azevedo.
Megan Herring, right?
But and I expressed why I had asked Todd to help facilitate the retreat in respect that I have for Todd. And then I thought you did a great job of guiding our conversation today. And I'll let you guys kind of define or share how we're going to form or shape that conversation or shape the retreat.
We had proposed a sort of structure that looked like we're going to discuss vision, mission, values, goals, objectives. And Todd made a couple of comments and suggestions that I thought were really good and saved us a bunch of time and probably let us not talk about stuff we might not even be ready to talk about yet, but gave us a really good focus on what we probably could talk about and still allow us to have those conversations we need to have, meaning coming together, figuring out who we're going to be when we grow up and what we're going to do, all that kind of stuff, which is really the heart of what I think the retreat, what we all meant when we said we needed to go talk about it. So my take on it was really valuable to have that discussion with him in particular. What if any coaching he got from our staff? It's only their job. They did a good job.
I wouldn't say I coached him. Todd coaches me.
Ah,
So just a question, I know there's an obligation to do Brown Act training every now and then, every 2 years, I don't know. Is that gonna be covered at the retreat or is that gonna be done at a different time of day?
That's a great question. So
Yeah.
Todd is adamant that we have some victories in that meeting. And so he wants to accomplish some things. And Brown Act training is something that could happen in another meeting. We know we must do it.
Yeah.
It's gonna be scheduled in there. But if we get into too good of a conversation, we don't want to stop the
Put it at the end.
conversation.
That's good again.
So it'll be push back. That was Lucy's recommendation, push back to the end. And if you're too deep in something that you need to finish, you should finish, we'll put Brown Act training on the end.
That's good, yeah, I like that.
And I think the one suggestion, and I think Todd was saying, the agenda will be enough fluid that we can take a vote every once in a while. Are we on the right track here? I know, or do we need to switch? And if Brown Act is required to move into a next topic, and Megan says, wait a minute, you're gonna talk about this, you really need to do Brown Act before you do that, we might have to make that kind of a decision.
I don't know, that was really only to do with it. Brown Act might influence the analysis of the bylaws
Yeah,
and not so much when we're still dealing with big concepts and.
exactly.
Finals, what's that?
The bylaws,
Oh, bylaws, sorry.
what bylaws?
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So we might not get that, but if there's an item to be pushed, it would be the Brown Act, because we can do that discreetly at the next.
Yeah, for whatever it's worth, so it would be 7 times I think I've done it now. So I just trying to do the math of it, right? So it's clearly a training session that is self-contained,
Self-contained, yeah.
and therefore it can be done at any time. So I think that's a really good idea. So.
And we did do it, in all fairness, 3 years ago, but I think they're commenting on the pea-sized brains that we all have. We can't hold that in there.
No, it has
But we
to
have,
be.
and it has to be, and we have members that have not, John is a new member, but he's someone who went through it, whereas Jennifer's a new member, Jenny Biggs is a new member who hasn't gone through the training.
Ever, yeah. Send her home with the word, geez.
It just related to that topic, I have a question. So I've given some thought to how I see like what next year would look like. And I wrote it down. And I find that when I see stuff and I read it, I might have a preliminary reaction like, ugh. And then I think about it for a day or two and I might say, oh, right, or the alternate approach. I'm fine either way, but I don't know how you guys digest information. Would you like me to send what I've written, or would you rather just wait until the meeting? I'm happy to, it's only about 3 pages long. I can share with you my understanding. There's one vote of whatever we are, 9. I'm not trying to do anything that says, it should be this way, but I do have some thoughts. I think I even tried to write them kindly to say, this is a way to think about it. So,
We had, when we originally defined what we thought we would want to be covering, we had definitely proposed that everybody put some thought in and write down
okay.
and submit to us so that we'd have, people who'd had time to think about it and write it.
Mhm.
Todd suggested that in fact, he felt that might take up too much time. That what he would like to do was kind of get in a structure that everybody really understood, this is what we have to do, and get everybody on the same page as to what the scope might be of what our job is. And then beyond that, he felt the vision, the mission, the what else we might want to encompass comes in only after we've had that first structural conversation.
Tactical stuff. Right?
Yeah, he wants us to work off certain documents, certain, the language in the tax measure, the language in the JPA, and get that as sort of consensus and then he's made a very interesting point, which is if we see our role as going further or in a different way, we can develop a process for referring it to the board for approval, or developing a minority report, or just deciding for ourselves where we want to go. But that would all be outside of the initial structural buy-in, where everybody says, okay, this we have to do. Then beyond that, these are things we might want to do.
Yeah, so what I wrote was each of the 3 buckets, right? Finance bucket, is there a way to do that differently?
Yeah.
And not to preview it, but I believe there is a way to do it much more efficiently. And then there's the transparency bucket, which I have a little bit of a question mark on. And then there's a work plan budget, and I have a suggested approach which pushes it way forward and doesn't wait to the end of the year. And it's, I give a little bit of precision, somewhat to the conversation we were having earlier. Now, I'm happy to not give that out at all because I don't want to create any big, but if you like, I can share it.
Why don't you just bring 9 copies to the meeting?
I could do that.
Just single space?
No. I don't type real well, so you'll notice that most of everything I write is, instead of 8 paragraphs, it's 2 because I hate typing. Yeah, so.
And before you make the copies, let me just say that I think we may be discussing more about, are we gonna have pre-work or are we not, what's it gonna be? And if we run it by Todd again and get some consensus.
Didn't he say that he thought not?
No, what I heard him say was the pre-work is gonna be, everybody has to read, go through and make comments on Measure C, JPA, and whatever other big fat documents we put in the list of big fat documents.
I thought it was, what do you have to have in the room in order to be able to have an informed discussion?
That's another, yeah.
Oh, was it, where are we?
Because instruction of COC is only a paragraph. It's
well,
really 1 paragraph, right?
Yes and no. I mean, he actually held up another document. I couldn't actually tell what that document was. It was the JPA agreement.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I sort of understood too that it's helpful for everybody, not that by now everybody ought to have them memorized practically, but for everybody to know exactly what those things say ahead of time.
Okay, that was his
Mark,
pre-work.
what was
That was
yours?
his, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That everybody, if we all walk in there knowing what those things say, then we're a step ahead.
Okay.
My original thought had been to have more of pre-work, but
Mhm.
Most of that was shot down.
So we have homework that we're supposed to do, I mean,
I think, is he gonna
Yeah,
send
we'll get it out.
okay.
Yeah.
So, but.
But it's-
Soon.
Yeah, it's definitely soon, yeah.
So it's,
And the good news is that Martinez made the order at Comforts, so.
Hey.
The important stuff is done.
Okay, when you guys figure it out, if you'd like me to send some, I'll give it to him and then you guys can decide what you like with it. It's not a long read, it's pretty quick. It's just fundamentally, but it might be helpful to digest ahead of time, but I don't want to disrupt the flow of things. So I'm fine to just come and make copies. So
If it's
whatever you
not,
decide, I'm good with.
if it's not a long read, maybe you just go with the suggestion of bringing the copies to the meeting and then we all can just take a few minutes to read it.
That's what I suggested.
That's fine too, sure.
Sure.
That's fine.
okay.
Hot items,
Um,
I have one. On the TAMP COC, we decided that we don't have enough diversity. And we bumped it up to the board level, and the TAM commission is told us to start, basically set up a subcommittee to deal with diversity, equity, inclusion issues, and basically get some new members, because we're all white, okay? And I'm saying that to you because they're doing it, and I think we should consider doing something along the same lines.
So you recommend that as an agenda item for each?
Yeah, I am. It's gonna be different.
Mhm.
I mean, TAM is, most of the people, I'm the taxpayer representative, there's, bicycle, there's a lot of special interests, but
Right.
probably where we're gonna settle on is some sort of geographic thing. All right,
Which we have geographic.
well, I'm saying, but this will be the canal and Red City, it's a different geographic.
Yeah.
So, and that probably is acceptable, given all the other interests.
Right.
That we would have to come up with something that's different, I think, but I'm not positive. I think we gotta discuss it, it's an issue.
Yeah.
We have the same problem in our COC.
so
They wanna
I
check
I
this.
think, I think this probably is better for the next meeting rather than the
Well,
retreat.
Yeah, the other thing is, we're gonna, at some point, I think we'll ask the board to
Yeah,
direct us.
I was just gonna say, doesn't the board appoint?
Yes.
We don't pick our.
No, but that's what we did, it was percolating at our level, I was
Yeah,
And
causing
somebody
some
will
trouble
wanna
by
talk
something.
to the superior
And we
court.
basically went to the president of our COC, and he said, well, we'll have to go up to the board, and that's what I'm saying. But we discussed that as an item and make a recommendation to the board and see if they like it.
Mhm.
Okay?
and I can tell you that every organization I have ever belonged to in this county, Master Gardeners, the grand jury, everything else has the same issue.
Mhm.
And particularly when it's
Well, we gotta deal
something
with
that
it, yeah.
requires that you
Volunteer time.
volunteer time and that I know with Master Gardeners, the question was always, how much do you pay me? And it was like, no, but
Well,
let's
well, we have to
let's
go with
adjourn and then we can turn off the recording and
I'm finished.
continue the discussion.
Right.
So,
Move to adjourn, whatever.
yes.
So we don't have, you can just do it.
Move on.
I adjourn the meeting.
Adjourn and then adjourn.
All in favor? Aye.
Okay.
Done.
Okay.